2021 Business Success webinar for this year. We are super excited for you all to be participating and to be following the chamber. We have plenty of webinars coming up in the next year or so. So be on the lookout for that on our calendar of events and through our e-blast. So you'll be learning more as we plan those out. Really briefly, as we get started today, just make sure you enter in any questions in the chat or in the Q&A feature. We'll make sure to answer those questions towards the end. And also, we do have the raise hand feature. So if you want to go ahead and talk to David and ask him directly, we could go ahead and do that. I'll make sure to unmute you and have that opportunity for you to ask him directly. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to David. He's the CEO of Vermilion Events and Design Group, and he'll be talking all about To Infinity and then beyond. So David, thank you so much, and we look forward to today's presentation.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate you guys having me. Welcome, everybody. My name is David Twigger. As she mentioned, I'm with Vermilion Events and Design Group. We're a local meeting and planning event company that's been here for 6 years now, but I've been in the industry, and I'm born and raised here in Arizona. I've been in the industry for about 30 years. So I'm very, very excited to talk about just some things about what we're all thinking about is how did we make it through the pandemic, what's to come, and how people are doing different pivots, which we're going to hear that word a lot, even though some of us don't like it, and what things you can do to possibly not completely change what you do, but to possibly just add to what you do that'll help you survive and thrive possibly in the pandemic as it comes and possibly goes away a little bit later on. So as she mentioned, definitely please ask some questions. They'll be monitoring that. If it's pertinent, I'll try and get to it right away. And if not, we'll definitely have time for questions and answers because I like it interactive. I am not very technical on certain things, so I try to add some fun animations into the presentation, which is great because it's a lot of can do, but hopefully it's helpful and we'll have a little bit of fun. So thank you for having me, and I think we're going to go ahead and just get started. So I named this the To Infinity Beyond, which is basically to grow and get beyond of what's going on. Obviously, it's a steal from a certain movie, but we can't put that picture on there because then I get in trouble. So, but definitely enjoy that piece of it. So we're going to go to infinity and beyond right now. How to diversify and not lose your identity as you try and survive through the pandemic. Again, my name is David Twigger. I'm a 25-year veteran of the hospitality industry. Born and raised here in Arizona, but I've also lived in Southern California a few times and Columbus, Ohio once, which is random, but it was great. I am a minority-owned and operated business. I've won multiple local and national awards for innovation, collaboration, and meeting and event design. My contact information there, they will send the slides. It's not proprietary, so you utilize later so you can pay attention. You can take some notes, but you'll have access to all the slides afterwards, which is great. So then we can just kind of work together for that. And I'm always here to answer more questions afterwards. So the question really is to be or not to be. Do we stay who we are, or do we pivot, or do we not pivot? If you look at some of the information before the pandemic started, the blue bar is, do we have any plans to change who we are or what we're doing? And obviously that wasn't much. Right beforehand, there were a few who were going to change or maybe expand who they are and what they were doing with your businesses. During the first 6 months, obviously that changed dramatically. People realized that I need to possibly do some changing of who I am and what we do. And so he planned on doing that. Then the second 6 months hit, which nobody really predicted would take that long. Obviously, it's just as dramatic, even more people. The interesting piece, though, is that right now in the beginning, we just did a poll last week to find out, and there's a lot of positive hope and thinking of what's going to happen. Now that there are vaccines coming out, there's a lot of things that happen with the vaccine, so people aren't really sure. So it's starting to level out a little bit, but again, there's still some changes and stuff that we need to be doing, which is what we're going to talk about right now. The reality of how companies are dealing with the crisis and preparing for the recovery tells a very different story. One of pivoting to business models conducive to short-term and long-term survival, along with long-term resilience and growth. Pivoting is and should be a lateral move that creates enough. Hold on, I'm going to change something on my screen because it's blocking some of my pieces. So I apologize. Here we go. And so, yeah, so for 2021, we're going to go ahead and get back. Sorry about that. Pivoting should be a lateral move that creates enough value for the customer and the business. So you're not going to completely change who and what you do, but it just needs to be beneficial for everybody that's involved. Change is scary, but it's also a good thing because some of these things are actually helping businesses expand on what they usually do and what they started to do before the pandemic. So not all pivots result in good business performance. People actually kind of move around and are not really sure where to go, how to do it. They forget of who they are and what their core business is, and that's something that you really don't want to be doing. There's about 3 conditions that are necessary for such lateral moves to work, and we're going to go over those really quickly. The first pivot is that you must stay aligned with who the business is, with one or more of the long-term trends created or intensified by the pandemic. That means, it could include like remote work, shorter supply chains. People can't get the items that they used to need to do their business, their supplies and such. Social distancing, consumer introspection, and enhanced use of technology are all pieces and puzzles that happen when you try and pivot the first time for the business. And you must stay aligned. And what that means is I saw a lot of businesses that completely left what they were and try to 100% change who they are and how they did business. And that's really not what you're trying to do with a pivot or a change. You're trying to take something that you do and actually enhance that and maybe kind of alter it a little bit, but it's still, you are to your core what your businesses are. Whether you're a huge company or like us, we're a very small company, we'll have some ideas of what we do. But when we pivoted, we just kind of took pieces of what we were already doing and expanded on that. And that's what we were trying to show people what to do. If everybody's seen, Friends, you'd love that episode where he screams, pivot, 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 which is what everybody was trying to do. So pivoting works for digital platforms, obviously, for those companies who were already digital, but doesn't help traditional businesses, those of us who weren't digital or virtual before. So I went ahead and used an example that we're familiar with, and that's the example of restaurants or catering. They have been battered by the lockdown, with many owners pondering whether to close for good or not. The usual way to think about restaurants includes envisioning a seating area next to the kitchen area. However, restaurants are kitchens whose output can be delivered to customers in a number of different ways using various kinds of business models. There's eat-in, takeout, delivery, and catering are just the tips of some of the icebergs that people probably didn't, assume they could do, but they started to do that, which is great. So again, that pivot's in your face, pivot, 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 which we're all trying to figure out how to do. And for restaurants and catering, one pivot would be to offer a flat rate for a set number of meals per week, per month, with a limited menu of choices. Restaurants could increase their margins as they learned how to manage captive demand, meaning that people obviously all of a sudden wanted to do takeout. And so a lot of restaurants who really probably didn't do takeout had to do some pivoting and some changes. And they learned, okay, what does it take? Are our dishes able to be, done takeout wise? Do we have the actual material? Do we take now some of our servers and put them on the phones and have them actually doing, the packing up of the meals in the kitchen? So they kind of have, again, alter what they were doing, but kind of worked with what the pandemic was giving people to do. Another pivot would be offer a combination of pre-cooked dishes with sides or additions that could be prepared at home using ingredients supplied by the restaurant or the caterer. They could then send a video link that walks the customer through preparation, thus incorporating an experimental and learning element. The reason I have those asterisks there is the good thing is that with the new changes and everybody going virtual and digital, you don't have to have like 100%, movie quality videos that you're sending people out to do. You can actually just do like, some Zoom calls or just record them on certain pieces. And as long as people can hear you and as long as the lighting is good, then it's an acceptable form of video. And it's something, a way to communicate to your customers that you can do different pieces and different elements and the changes that you're doing. And we'll talk about how to get that on social media and stuff a little bit later on. The next piece obviously is then you can, show those videos, do the takeout. Both of these pivots would lead to a greater variety of business models, which could become a permanent feature of the restaurant landscape, especially if the trend toward remote work from home consolidates over the long run. So, good or bad news, you have to make that lemonade. Is a lot of people who are doing these kind of changes, we've had some restaurants and caterers that have become very, very good at either meals, to-go meals, dining out, delivery, and they've found a way to work that into, even when we get back to what we would call a norm, they actually have this new piece that they can offer at certain times. So the possibility is that you did a little bit of a change, you didn't completely leave who you were, but now when you get back to what your business is supposed to be doing, you may also have this other piece that is another form of revenue that you can now do, maybe for Super Bowl or, special holidays and stuff like that. You may not want to do it 100% of the time because it's just too much work. But if you want to add it to certain times and different things that you're offering, it's a whole new stream of revenue, which is a positive note for everything that we're going through with the pandemic. The number 2 condition that we talk about a lot, here's one of the fancy screens that I did. Hopefully you enjoy those. That's my dancing number 2. Second pivot must be a lateral extension of the business's existing capabilities, cementing, not undermining its strategic intent. And that's just a fancy way of don't change who you are, just add to it. Again, we had a lot of businesses who got out of like the meeting and event planning business. There's so many different pieces. There's DJs and rental companies and production, and they decided to completely leave who they were instead of possibly altering what they do. Faced with a sudden collapse in travel, an example, Airbnb moved swiftly to help its hosts financially and connect them with potential guests. Obviously, people weren't traveling. They didn't feel comfortable traveling, or they just couldn't travel. So how is Airbnb and their hosts now going to connect revenue? So what they decided to do is figure out, what do they already have? They have this stream of pictures and videos of the homes when people are traveling and things like that. Now hosts can now offer online events focused on cooking, meditation, art therapy, songwriting, virtual tours, a lot of different activities in and around the home, with users joining for a modest fee. So what they did is they actually they had the platform already and they just changed what people can do. So now this pivot represents one more step in Airbnb's evolving approach from its traditional business model of facilitating matches between hosts and guests to its move to become a full range lifestyle platform. So they've actually took what was a negative, and now people can actually, when they're traveling, they may book their Airbnb like they always did, but now they can actually, host, a cooking class, or they can do a cooking class while they're there before they get there. They can do activities, they can have some entertainment while they're there. It's a huge different it's opened a lot of different crazy doors for Airbnb, which is kind of a great thing to see. They can now become a platform that people can use not just to arrange their next vacation, but develop a whole cosmopolitan mindset throughout the year, learning about other cultures from a distance and celebrating the diversity of the world on a daily basis. Very well written from Airbnb, so I give them thumbs up for that. And again, they took not just who they were and changed it, they just kind of altered and enhanced it, which is definitely a positive, what you can do. So the big question is, well, how do I do this? How do I start the process? So what you need to do is take time to reaffirm your basic thesis of your business. Slowing down also allowed certain entrepreneurs to make double sure that their view of their future marketplace was still valid. And basically what that means again is you need to stop, take a moment, and figure out really who you are and what you do. And some people say, you know, I'm a printing company or I'm a meeting planning company. And this is what I do, is I just do meeting planning. Well, if you take a step back, there's different processes that you can look at, and we're going to do and show like how we did that. Define certain things that you may be able to do to expand on what you already do for your business. So how we do this, and here's the steps again, and you're going to have access to these slides, is you need to look internally. And when I say internally, just not like the facade of who you are is what your business is what our company does and how you do it. You go ahead, you know, and what you have as far as your staffing, as far as your collateral, you know, if you're a printing business, you've got printers, you've got access to the internet, you may have different size of printing and copiers and staff who have different abilities that you didn't really know of. And what you can keep is something to look at, is like, if you're going to make this change or this pivot, what part of who you are can you keep before you make that next step, which is a good thing. And then you look externally. And what that means really is that you're going to look at the data that's out there. You're going to look at your competitors, because they may be doing some changes that make sense, and they may be doing some changes that completely don't make sense. And you need to keep an eye on all of that. And watch your parameters. And really what that means is, don't try and make a choice that's too big for what you want to do. I saw some companies that had some great ideas and some huge aspirations, but unfortunately what that meant was that they pushed themselves too far. They went too far for what they really want to do externally. And then what I call landing is like where you're going to land with this, is you need to look at short-term goals, long-term goals, and those small steps that you can do. Well, you know, obviously a long-term goal is to make sure that your company is still there, make sure that your company doesn't completely lose who they are, and then what are the small steps that you can do to take those in. And one of the first steps is what the old saying is, you know, cut the fat, not the muscle. And the reason we say that is because part of slowing down is trimming operations, but only around the margins. Don't make those big giant cuts. We saw some companies who were like, you know, right off the bat, they're like, okay, well, I'm going to have to cut payroll. I'm going to have to let people go. And instead of that, this is the counter to, you know, the now conventional wisdom of crisis-driven cutting into the muscle by reducing payroll faster and deeper than you think is necessary. Obviously, we all got scared. I sat here as a meeting planner, you know, and I lost 93% of my business for 2020. And I did that in the first 2 to 3 months because we were the first ones hit. People stopped traveling. They weren't going to go into meeting rooms. It just wasn't going to happen. And so I sat there looking at this 12-month calendar with all these red marks, and it was all gone. And I was like, okay, well, you know, the first thing that pops in my head, I can't pay my staff. What am I going to do? Do I have to let them go? And that was the wrong first step and jump to go to. So yes, take advantage of the fallen prices to renegotiate possibly rental leases, supplier contracts, but consider making only marginal cuts in payroll expenses, primarily through performance management rather than layoffs or furloughs. And this is just really talking about like your staffing. Like, do you have to let them go? Are there different ways to keep them on? Are there different ways to cut? We changed where our offices were. We changed where our storage room was, our warehouse pieces, and that made a huge difference for at least the first 3 to 4 to 6 months, where we could actually take a step back again and watch what's happening to make sure that we did it correctly. So my next suggestion is watch the new data like a hawk. And what I mean by that is take a look at your industry and take a look at what's going on and watch it on a daily basis. It seems a little bit, you know, you get very overwhelmed, you know, about reading the news and all of the bad things that are going on, and a lot of the negativity, but through all of that, if you watch some of the changes that are being made, you may get inspired and you may have some ideas of what to do. And the way to do that is to watch your industry organizations. For my industry, we've got a National Association of Catering and Events and the International Live Events Association, Meeting Planners International. There's a much broader section of industry organizations that we're trying to help people with what they do. If you remember, obviously, the Chamber of Commerce is wonderful because they have information on what's going on and what can be done for businesses, and there's support for what the state of Arizona was doing, what they were offering with the CARES Act, and things like that. So those are the kind of organizations that you need to be watching. Find the top groups in your segment and watch what they're doing and some of their information. Watch your competitors and your partners. This is a big thing that I found out with people, is that their strategic partners and their vendors, people weren't really paying attention to what they were doing. And some of the pivots and changes that people made were actually with the people that they used to do business with. So not their clients, but their vendors and their suppliers, who actually turned out to be possible now future clients. And that's just a way that we'll talk about a little bit. Social media is my biggest double-edged sword. We'll talk about that again, just because it's incredibly stressful, not just because of a lot of the negativity that was out there, but because it's all over the place. Like, you can sit there and watch social media, and you can watch your competitors or people out there who do the same thing that you do. And it may seem like, well, wow, they've got all this business. They found this new business. They found these new clients. They're thriving and I'm not. And it's incredibly stressful. So just take that with a grain of salt for ideas, and don't let it become like this negative dark cloud over your wells, because that's not what it's supposed to be there for. What I keep telling people to do also is to slow down. The first immediate piece that people do is entrepreneurs tend to run at a breakneck speed. Many companies that through this whole thing were no exception. They just ran like, we have to fix this. We have to fix this now. We're never going to make this whole thing. If you could just take a step back and breathe, it becomes a little bit more clear of some options that you may have. However, those that have been successful when their markets started to melt down, rather than slamming on the brakes, they downshifted in order to listen to customers, track the markets that they're in, conserve some resources, and enhance their ability to change if needed. When everybody kind of took it, the first 3 months, everybody was just crazy, especially in my industry, because it was just cancellation after cancellation after cancellation. Deposits were getting put back and revenues weren't there. And we had this really scary focus of what the future was going to be. But those of us who slowed down and took a look and said, like, okay, this is happening. What do we need to do? And you're going to see, like, some of the items that we ended up looking at is we dissected our industry and looked at what was going on and what possibilities that we had to do. And how you do that is we did some testing. Our business process testing of what we did, it's one of the fancy things, my animations, very proud. You test for weaknesses and prepare internally. Companies should apply increased scrutiny, not only to the marketplace, but also to their own internal points of failure. That was just a piece that was written. So not really a failure, but just some ideas of that things that you do. You can stay the course if you stay ahead of the original disruption that external shocks can cause, meaning the pandemic, meaning that your streams of revenue have stopped. You need to stay ahead of that and find out what you can do. Is it 100% done? Are there people who can actually use what you needed to do? On March 11th, the CEO of Travel Perks decided on a fire drill by requiring everyone to work from home in order to learn what their weaknesses were going to be. And this is just an example of they weren't really sure because nobody worked from home before. And so they threw that out there as far as one of the tests of what they needed to do for possible change. And that remote work was unprecedented at the venture, and they quickly identified some problems. And that was, not everybody was set up for home offices. So the trend was like, work from home. You can't come into the offices. It's too crowded. And they found out, okay, well, we're going to try this first. And they said, everybody's going to work from home first. And they found out, which was a good thing early on, is that certain people didn't have internet, or the wrong kind of internet, or the speed was wrong. They didn't have printers. They didn't have the right kind of laptops. Not everybody had a computer at home. The connections were different. And they found these out early on so they could make some changes to where they had kept people in offices, but spread out. And some people who were able to work from home worked from home. And they found that early on, which was a good thing. When you're looking at how to change, it's very daunting just because you're not really sure. You feel that your pool of customers is shrunk. You know, you look at geography as far as like, well, this is where our customers are and we can't get to them, or we can't do business with them. So what another suggestion we start off with is to re-look at your geography. And we take a deep dive into your local geography, which is what we did. You know, you look into the city of Phoenix, and there's many different areas to the city of Phoenix. This is just one of the breakdowns that we do from the chamber and one of the CVBs that we work with. There's, you know, Phoenix, there's downtown, there's the Northeast Valley, Southeast Valley, Northwest, and Southwest. There's different areas, and there's different customers. There's different wants and needs in these different areas. And a lot of people just kind of were able to take a step back and realize, okay, well, we've been focusing, like a lot of my customers were in the Phoenix, downtown Phoenix, and Northeast Valley area. Come to find out. And I didn't really realize that until I stopped and realized, okay, well, let's take a look at who our customers were doing and where our inventory and where our revenue were coming from, and realized that we haven't reached out to the Southeast Valley. Gilbert, Mesa, Chandler is a huge area for events, social events, corporate events. There's brand new, huge corporations that are down there. And we really hadn't reached out or try and do, you know, an area for those. And so that kind of opened our eyes for that. These local areas have, again, like different segments, demographics, needs and demands, East Valley versus Paradise Valley, Chandler and Gilbert versus downtown, and then versus uptown. These are all different people. And there's different possibilities for everybody's business in these different areas. We just need to learn to talk to them. Jump out of that box that we're all in. It's another saying that we're all tired of, but the digital age allows for a much larger reach. Everyone else went virtual. Why not you? Don't think that you can't do that. Social media now has opened up to where, you know, Facebook can do live, Instagram can do live, Snapchat can, all these different areas and stuff like that. So don't think that you can't do that and you can't reach. YouTube is huge for people who are trying to learn something new. All you have to do is go into YouTube and type in, you know, how do I post videos on my Facebook, or how do I reach, you know, clients via video? And you'll have this huge amount of information. Some of it's kind of, you know, odd, but a lot of helpful information is out there. So don't be afraid to kind of take that jump of what you're doing. Once you look at the geography and some of your new possibilities with that, you need to look at an internal and external audit that we talked about in the beginning. And the first one is, who are you? So we did that as a company, as a meeting and event planning company. I said, who am I? You know, we do events. And so instead of just saying we do events, we talked about what do we do for the events. We took each step that we normally do. So we took our step and process of when a client reaches out to us all the way to the end after that event. And we took step by step of what we do. And then the next one was like, who do we use and who do we interact with? And we found a lot more of our, what we call vendors and strategic partners, were now people that possibly could be used for other ways of gaining revenue. And also they became clients of ours because they needed assistance on how to do certain things. We had rental companies who jumped in and helped out to set up pop-up test sites and COVID test sites. And so they reached out to planners and designers of how would you normally set up something, you know, similar. And we worked with them to help them figure out like, okay, well, you're going to have, you know, drive up lines, and there's, you know, you have to take care of the people who were there. So you have to have separate tents for that, and food and beverage and things like that. And we worked with them on how to design that new revenue stream for them, which was great. We looked at our staff and found out that our staff had, talents and abilities that we really never reached in and tapped into, which was great. We had staff who really wanted to be doing social events and not corporate events. We had staff that had a background in production, and we just kind of tapped in some really new abilities with that. And then also we talked to our staff and said, what do you want to do? Not just with events, but we talked about that as far as what do you want to do besides like events? And we kind of tapped in some of theirs. The external audit we did was, we read a lot of industry news. We took place in the industry organizations like the chambers, CVBs. We watched the communication flow, like the Event Industry Alliance, the CDC, the World Health Organization were actually putting out tons of information, and part of it related to what we do as far as events, and part of it related to all different kinds of businesses. So you can obviously get it from there. Excuse me, we watched what I call the eggs in one basketers. Those are the people who had a really good business model set up for what they were doing, but they really didn't diversify at all. And so they only had this one stream, and they really kind of took it away. And when that was gone, they weren't really ready for anything else. And that was not a good thing. We looked at who's willing to bend. We worked with a lot of different vendors and strategic partners and new people out there to find out if you used to do this for us, but can you now do this for us? So we had, printing companies that used to do like invitations and signage and stuff like that. And now they did the, 6 foot away markings and things for COVID. We had rental companies that used to do tables and chairs, and now they do the acrylic plastic things in front of registration and for food barriers and things like that, which is great. So we kind of work together on what we need and what they need, and were they allowed to bend on that. And the who knewers, like who knew you could do that? Like, I didn't know we could go to rental companies, and they already had rope and stanchion, obviously, and the plastic barriers and access to that they never really used before they now needed to use. We call so what you do then is like the pasta test, which is obviously you throw the pasta against the wall and find out, does it work? For us, for Vermilion events, it was looking at virtual events because everything went virtual. So how do we do that? What's a hybrid event? A lot of people in the meeting and event industry didn't want anything to do with virtual because we felt that took away from our live events. And we realized, well, at some point, we're going to have to learn to do this. So early on, we learned all there was. We partnered with a production company and found out how to do virtual events, and the right ways and the wrong ways. And there's a lot of wrong ways to do those. It's a lot more than just a Zoom call. There's a lot more that goes into it. Hybrid events, once the numbers started to come down, was a big thing where you could do some people virtually, some people at home. So we had to learn to do that. With the information that we had and the diversity, we started doing public speaking. We designed classes for people on how to go from corporate events to social events, customer service, how to sell, because people had to change those things. So all those things were new things that we tried to throw out at the wall, like the pasta test. We did virtual fundraising and no longer a local audience, which was great. So the fundraising was big. We did a lot of nonprofits and things like that. And we found out that virtual fundraising, a good thing about it is we're not there. You have to change how you do silent auction, things like that. But we found a lot of them found huge audiences. We were able to do like 100 or 200, some of them 300 people in a ballroom. But now they included like different states. They had people, all over the place in Ohio, Texas, California, Denver. People were bidding and donating, and it's a whole new stream for these nonprofits. And it was like a breath of fresh air for them. There's social media storefronts that you can do. So there's rental items that we have for different events and things like that we did, that we found out, okay, well, we can put them on our social media storefronts. We can put them on our collateral and website. And if people want to rent those, they could. We never really went into that because it's things that we use for events. And then we started doing some how-to seminars like this one as well. And then the biggest double-edged sword that's out there for everybody really is social media. So I want to take a little note on there because it can be very helpful, but it can be so incredibly distracting. And again, it's that dark cloud of, you see so many people out there doing things that you think that you should be doing. And you shouldn't be doing anything that you don't want to be doing, or you don't think you have to be doing. A lot of people are out there and they see that, I saw different planners like doing this and doing this. And I was like, should I be doing this? Should I watch another Zoom call? So I watched another webinar. Again, remember to take that slow down and go through, and you do not allow yourself to be overwhelmed. If you have to cut yourself off from social media a couple times a day, go ahead and do that. There's one called the Good News Network, which is just nothing but happy, nice, loving stories. And so I put that on my feed. And so I actually got some positive stuff throughout the whole thing. Take a step back and appreciate. Don't compare yourself to everybody else. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. You can gain information from them, and you can share information from them, but don't do that comparison thing, because you'll drive yourself crazy. Get inspired. Watch things that you don't normally watch. The communication tool that I showed everybody is, I asked everybody in my industry, I asked caterers who normally don't talk to in-house, like chefs at resorts and stuff. And I said, start talking to each other, follow each other. And they found out that they all had the same problems during this pandemic, and they were coming up with different solutions that they could each use. And they normally wouldn't have done that. So that's what social media is good for. Feel free to show off. You've got certain things. If you have a success story that you did, show it off and talk about it. And you can do it more than once. People think that you can't, but definitely you can. There's a whole social media class that I offer as far as how to help improve who you are and what you do through social media. And that's a whole other thing. But also try and have fun, because that's what it's designed for. Another piece is diversification is very, very important. And this isn't just the internal diversification, which is important as far as having a very diverse crowd. Beyond just ethnicity and backgrounds, it's experience is a big thing. I've got people on my team that worked for destination management companies and production companies, and I have someone who was in the arts and dance and did Broadway shows and stuff, and that helps with how we do entertainment for events and things like that. So it's very, very important. Don't just jump ship as far as what you're trying to do. You need to expand what you're doing and diversify while holding on with who you are. That's the message we had in the beginning. You need to start in that wheel well. Just look at each spoke, meaning that you already have your wheel well of business that you're working on. And you need to look at each individual spoke that's on that wheel and find out how that can help you with making those changes. You can touch much further than you think. It is the digital age, and it's very, very scary if you're not into those digital pieces, but there's people out there who can help you. And you can do little pieces. You don't have to have like these full-on productions to make your changes. What do you touch affects with what your business does. And that really means is look into your strategic partners, look at your vendors and your suppliers, see if they're doing something that you can actually be a part of, and ask them to do that. Events, catering, photographer, transportation, and rentals. What I wrote on there is really just, through this whole pandemic, some of the things that I did that caught some people's eyes is I tried to help people who were in my industry diversify and expand on what they do. And so I had clients who needed, I had DJs, and DJs weren't doing events anymore. And I said, okay, well, you know what? People are at home, they're working from home, they're stuck in there for a while. Why don't you create some playlists, and you can sell those playlists for cheap, obviously, but they went on Spotify and things like that, and they actually created playlists which they could send out to people because they had tons of music. Same thing with photographers. They weren't doing event photography, so they did some landscape photography, or they went out and they offered people who got married a year ago, 5 years, 10 years ago, let's look at your wedding pictures again. Let's do some really cool collages that we can do, because technology has changed and they can change all of that. And let's add some new photos that you can do in your home and your home office, which was great. Catering changed a lot. Rentals changed a lot as well. So definitely make sure you do that to diversification, which is great. And then each part of the pie will actually fall back into place as you do this. So what we did finally for Vermilion Events is we watched the big picture. I tried to watch what was coming up. I didn't want to 100% change into virtual events, but I absolutely learned how to do virtual events. We reevaluated what an event is. So we know, like, we broke it apart into many, many different little pieces and found out what still can be done, what needs to be done when you go virtual or hybrid. Um, the diverse background allows me to be like a speaker to a broader audience. So I used to speak to industry organizations all the time, meeting planners international, things like that, about just the industry. But I realized as we broke down what we do for our clients is a lot more. And so I can speak to how to sell, because we sell to a lot of different type of clients, social and corporate and association and independent planners. And we have to realize all those different personalities. So I could speak to sales, and I can speak to how to survive on those pieces as well. We did some changing in staffing, and we actually hired on people part-time who were with other companies who had different skills. And so now we do site selection for different companies, meaning that we go out and we find the right places. If they want to change and still do certain meetings, right now you need a lot more space. You need some outdoor space. You need it virtual. So there's a lot of different needs. And so we took those people who were with different companies that were unfortunately let go, and we hired them on part-time and brought their skill set into ours. And it actually works out much better for us, which is a great thing. Finally, what are you thinking of doing? Everybody asked, like, what do you think is going to happen? When's it going to change? The first quarter, honestly, and I'm always very frank with everybody, as you'll find out if you work with me, I think is still going to be full of the pandemic. I don't think it's going to go away. The numbers are just out of control again, and we're going to have to learn how to maneuver this thing through. Yes, there are some vaccines, which is a good thing. The second quarter could be a little bit better, but the second quarter in Arizona starts our summer, which a lot of people's businesses either change. Sometimes it's better if you're like a summer company, but a lot of us, summer just kind of starts to die down and think people leave. So we're not really sure what's going to happen with that. The third quarter is going to be a balance. And my pictures got messed up, but I think it's going to be a working balance. Third quarter, we'll see, a much larger population with the vaccine, and people can try and get back to normal. But don't jump ship from your pivot or your change and go 100% back, because we honestly do not know what's going on. But to be planning, your next pivot is actually going to be pivoting back to what you did, slowly but surely. So if you expanded, which is great, and then you need to expand a little bit more on as far as how do we get back to our business while keeping some of these wonderful changes in there. And the fourth quarter, I'm going to be a positive person and say, yes, brace for impact. We've already seen this in my industry. The fourth quarter is going to be, everybody's moving everything to the fourth quarter. So everybody's trying to how do we find our staff and get them back again? How do we get back into what we were doing while still offering those new pieces and changes like that? So hopefully, again, that was helpful. I know it was kind of a lot of information. Stay true to who you are, dissect who and what you do, reach out to your vendors and your strategic partners and your industry folks like the Chamber and CVBs and other organizations, and help find what you really, really can do, because a lot of information is out there and you don't have to leave who you are. We just kind of grow on what you're already doing, which is definitely something we want to make sure we're doing. And I think that is it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. This was really informative for myself as well, as we are still trying to determine, what we are planning to do with our signature event as well. So very, very good information. So we'll go ahead and open it up for a couple questions. We have some time here. If anyone has any questions, make sure to drop them in the Q&A or in the chat box. Or if you're a little bit more brave, make sure to raise your hand and I'll go ahead and unmute you so you could ask David directly. So we'll open it up for questions now. And David, while we wait for questions, do you have any closing remarks, any last minute tips that you can share with everyone?
Yeah, hopefully anybody has any questions, even if it's just random or different pieces and stuff like that. So ask away right now. It's really daunting to try and do this and make those changes and stuff. Really what it is like, take some small steps. If your business has lasted, congratulations. It's still daunting to look into the future. Try and embrace some of those changes that you made, and don't hesitate to reach out to the sources that are out there. Reach out to the chamber, reach out to CVBs, reach out to industry organizations. If you feel that you're alone, you're absolutely not. There's people out there who want to help. And feel free, I've been teaching classes on this and I've been speaking on panels about the pandemic. I'm now a certified COVID compliance officer, which helps for events, but also helps me understand everything else that needs to happen with businesses and supply chains and such. And there's people out there who really can help. And I hope that people understand that, we don't want you to 100% change. If you did, that's great. But if you need help getting back into the flow of things, which I think is going to be a shock for people, there's ways to slowly do that. So.
Wonderful. And I do see some, no questions, but comments. So one from Roxanne. Thank you, David. This was super informative and we should all grow. And another.
Good to see you.
And another one from Hilda. Thank you, David. Yes, industry was hit hard, so we will come back stronger. So like David mentioned, we at the chamber are here to help as well. Our business development team is here to help as well, make those connections for you. So looks like we don't have any questions.
If we have some time, if I ask some questions, maybe we'll get a few pieces out there. So I see, there's some people out there who are part of, the industry that I'm in, but I'd be interested to hear just a quick story if there's someone who's in another part of the industry, or if there was a pivot that somebody did that has a success story maybe, or they had, some opportunities and some hurdles that they did. Who's out there that had to make some changes, or anybody out there who had to make some changes as far as like their business goes?
Sure. Anyone who would like to share a couple remarks, we'll open it up for that as well. Don't be shy. I know it's the first event of the year. I know everyone's coming back from winter break, so don't be shy. Make sure to speak up if you'd like.
Any random question? I know it's hard sometimes. Oh, do we have to allow people to say something, or?
If they raise their hand, we can go ahead and unmute them.
How do you raise your hand?
Oh, I think I see one from Karina. Allow. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Karina. We could hear you.
Hi. Good morning, everybody. So at my company, it started with just everyone here in the Scottsdale office started to work remotely back in March. And every few weeks, and then eventually every few months, they would send out updates saying, well, because of the state rule, we're going to keep working from home through this date and through this date. And it was always with the expectation that at some point we would go back to the office. Well, coming back from the holiday break right now on Monday, my manager reaches out to the whole team and we get on a little meeting, and he said, I need you guys to figure out which desks we're going to give up, because now the company is saying that we have too large of a space for the office here, and we're not going to need as much space going forward, because now they did take ownership of the decision rather than leaving it to the state. And so now they're deciding that we are going to permanently keep working from home, and they are going to keep space here for offices in Scottsdale, but it'll be more for in case you need to go to the office for the day. So we were split in two sides of one same building, like the IT department and some other departments were on one side, and the HR department and some other ones were on the other side. We're going to condense to just one side of the building, therefore the rent will be less. That way we also won't have that many people working side by side. So that's how I saw that the change happened in my company, that we finally took ownership, but it took 10-ish months, 9 months. But I think that's the right decision, because going forward, I think that's how the things are going to be done, where you have to be flexible. And now I'm also starting to see that jobs that used to be based here in Scottsdale, because we're the global headquarters here. So that was always their preference, to have people working out of the Scottsdale office if they were going to be working under headquarters. But they just hired someone in Florida that will be working in global headquarters, but based out of Florida. So I'm very glad that my company took that decision, where now we're not tied to one location, and they finally took the ownership of saying, okay, regardless of what the state says, this is what we're deciding for our company.
And Karina, that's wonderful, and that's a huge piece, obviously, because corporate real estate is definitely a thing for the Scottsdale and the Phoenix area, and a lot of companies. I'm glad that they took their time, because a lot of companies just made, I know of a large company that had offices in 3 different states, and they immediately closed one of them in Southern California, and the other ones were the same process of yours, as far as like they think, they had people working from home and they're not really sure on what to do. And I think it's a combination of, it's a cost thing of like, we have these leases and we have to pay for them. So if everybody's sitting at home, but I'm paying for these offices, kind of thing. And so it's, we have to negotiate. We're going to keep part of it, like you said, like half of it. And then they found out that people can be productive when they're working from home. You have to change possibly some processes and how people report in, and do like morning meetings and things like that. But you can do positive outcomes from it. Like you said, is I've had a lot of companies who, again, have expanded their reach and now can have people that, were wonderfully qualified, but like weren't going to move to Scottsdale for a position, but, they're right for the company, and now they can actually do that. So again, it's taking one of those pieces and doing that. I think it was frustrating for some employees in some companies that took so long for companies to do that, but it wasn't just like a yes or no piece, like, yes, we're going to have everybody work from home, done. They had to take some time to make sure that if they did that, and what if it didn't work? What if the way that people were working just didn't work, and it wasn't effective, and they weren't, successful at it, and then they have to go back and try and redo things. So taking that time and slowing down again sometimes is a good thing. It can be a little frustrating because you're like, what do we do? What do we do? But as long as they communicate and they gave you the resources, which is what it sounds like, to be successful, then that's a good thing. And I'm glad they're finding other people to open up the jobs to. I think that's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think we have a question in the Q&A. It's from, hey, Hilda. How should you go about working with brides directly instead of venues and planners? I rent out charger plates and do balloon decor. That's a touchy subject, Hilda. As a planner, I would say obviously you still want to work with planners and venues. I think there's ways for you to make sure that you're reachable for the brides directly. There's a lot more social media boards, question and answer boards, information boards that are out there on social media that you can do, place your items with and stuff like that, obviously. So don't walk away from planners, because we still need to work with you. But people finding ways to reach out directly to clients, because there are less planners. There are planners who aren't out there anymore. Venues who have either shut down or are paused, and you're like, well, people are still having these weddings. How can I get in touch with these brides? And that's probably what you're talking about. There are definitely some groups out there. Look on social media and then send me a note. There's actually some industry groups, and then there's like, Arizona Wedding Professionals. It's like a group on social media on Facebook, and brides actually and couples go into those groups. And you can constantly just put, this is what we have. You can post pictures of your inventory and things like that, which is a good thing. It's definitely hard. Social events are the first ones that are going to come back. They already have. So, keep reaching out to the planners and the venues, and then, you know, find those streams and find out where the brides are finding out their information. And those groups on social media is definitely one of the ways to do it, because they search for everything that's on there. And just a quick note is label everything that you're posting for exactly what it is. So if you're doing chargers, make sure everywhere in the comments of like your post says chargers, wedding chargers, dinner chargers, you know, things like that, and put on there constantly, because it'll show up on different searches and stuff like that. And we can talk some other stuff, but you can reach out to me.
Great. I think someone had raised their hand, but I don't see it. Let me see. Okay, there we go. Roxanne has a question.
Hi, David. So I actually just wanted to go ahead and echo something that David said. Unfortunately, and fortunately for me, but unfortunately, my business increased when the pandemic hit, because we had so many businesses small businesses that wanted to find new customers, find new ways to market. And so we did exactly what David talked about with the audits. We sort of broke down what the business was, because we didn't want to change who they were, if at all possible. When we broke down what the businesses were and what they did, and we kind of focused their marketing on keeping their brand the same, and just kind of showing these new things that they're doing, or the new ways in which they're helping customers, to help keep customers whenever possible and attract new ones based on these new services. And second thing is, he's absolutely correct about how these companies went about making the changes that they needed. My husband's company is a pretty large company, Waste Management, and they sent everyone home one day in April. And they found out that not only were the folks just as productive, but they are saving so much money because of building space and stuff. So for this next year, they're not even looking at going back right now. And so if you're a small business that needs to make some of these changes, not only can we help you with the programs that we have here at the chamber, but we can kind of help with those audits as well. So just if any of the small businesses need help and they're not already registered with one of our programs, I wanted to let them know that they can sign up for the CARES program or NABETC or Ascend, whichever they fit and qualify for, because we can help them do some of the things that David was talking about.
That's awesome. Thanks, Roseanne. As always, thanks for helping get everything put into place with this. I really appreciate that. But that is a big piece, obviously. You know, when we look at the big picture, so many companies have found out that they can do that. They can work from home. You know, even like medium-sized companies and stuff, where they can have them do that. You know, we always look for different ways. You know, we're looking at, we need to keep an eye on corporate real estate. It's becoming an issue in certain areas of the country because people are just not renewing their leases, and now you have like this huge boom of people who are building office space and they weren't using it. But then you have companies who have altered and pivoted a little bit, and they've actually grown, who are going to step into some of those spaces, which is kind of a good thing. So it'll balance itself out as people like become more successful and stuff like that. And Waste Management did do like really, really well as far as how they're making some changes and stuff, and companies like that, which is a good thing to hear, because it's what we want to see.
Great. Thank you, Roxanne, for sharing that about our other programs with the chamber.
Yeah, this is Gabe from Waste Management, and I was looking to speak with either Becky or Leanne.
Sorry about that. So again, thank you so much, David. This was really, really great. We do have another comment here that this was very informative. And like you all should have been noticing that there's a little recording feature. So this webinar is being recorded. We'll go ahead and share the link to the recording in our post-event email later this afternoon. So you should all be receiving that. But again, thank you so much. And we look forward to having everyone join us in our next couple of webinars later this month. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.